On this, the second part in our How I Get Away with Filmmaking on Linux series, we talk about visual effects software. This episode of Premiere Prep is sponsored by EditShare Lightworks. The Lightworks editor has been at the forefront of film editing, having been used on many of the finest films in cinema history. Hey guys, welcome to Premiere Prep. It's me, your host, Micah Pendleton, and if you haven't seen the first part in this series, make sure you watch it by clicking up here. Now this was originally going to be a single video. I was going to do just a single video on like 10 minutes of what I use for filmmaking on Linux. But as I started getting into it, I realized that even just part one was going to be nearly 30 minutes long, and it wound up being just that. And so I decided to split it up into an entire series. And so here we are with part two of that series, and we're talking about visual effects software. So let's jump over to my editing workstation. So just like part one, the first thing that we're going to do is go to each of these options websites and take a look to see exactly what they boast their software can do. And then we'll jump into each one and take a look ourselves. Now, for this part, I have three different options. My number one option and absolute favorite is Blender. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this option. It's absolutely amazing, but we'll go into more of that in just a second. My second option is Natron. Natron is kind of like a nuke form of compositor. It's really amazing and it's completely open source, and it's amazing to see how far it's come in such a short amount of time. But again, we'll get into that in a second. And the third option is kind of an industry standard, and it's also made by Blackmagic Design, kind of like Resolve, which was in the last part. And it is also amazing and very much an industry standard, and I cannot wait to jump into that one as well. So without further ado, let's jump into the web browser. So the first one we're obviously going to go over is Blender, and Blender is my favorite out of the three, but that's just my personal preference. So pro number one, let's get into some pros here, and it is very stable. That's pro number one. It is very stable. I don't think I've ever really had true crashes on the binary version. I gotta make that clear. If you're on, you know, like one of these release candidates or anything, it will be a little bit less stable more than likely. But on the binary version, they usually hold out and make it very, very stable. I absolutely love that about Blender. They make sure that you can go for a binary release and it's very stable. Absolutely love that. And pro number two, it does like everything. And I mean that very literal. It can do just about everything. So let's go over that real quick. It does, you know, materials and rendering, rigging, and it does animation, CGI. It has a full compositor, okay? It has a full compositor plus all the 3D stuff. And it even does game creation. It does camera and object tracking, and it even does video editing. And that is huge. That is very huge. The fact that it can do, like, I could basically do almost an entire movie start to finish right inside of Blender. I could pretty much go without using a single other tool, okay? But let's go over something else, and that is its library of extensions, or what is our pro number three, lots of support and add-ons. Because Blender is open source, there's a lot of development going on. A lot of people love it. A lot of people use it. It has the Python language, which a lot of people love to code in, and a lot of people just love to submit to the Blender project, and it's absolutely incredible. There are so many extensions that aren't even enabled when you install Blender. But as soon as you go into the add-ons page, you can enable everything, and Blender becomes like 20 times more powerful. It is absolutely incredible. All right, and now let's move on to pro number four, and that is it has a lot of format support, and I mean a lot. JPEGs, JPEGs 2000, NPG, Targa, OpenEXR, DPX, Cineon, I mean, you name it, it can accept just about everything. And that's just images. Look at video, AVI, MPEG, and I'm pretty darn sure that it uses FFmpeg, which is huge for me. I love FFmpeg, and it can be used for just about any file format. And it also does things like in the 3D world, it does, 3ds files, it does OBJs, and then it even does things like motion capture. It takes SVGs. It is unreal, all the format support that Blender has, and that is a very big pro, and I cannot love it enough for that. Okay, and then it also has a very customizable interface, as we can see right here. Definitely customizable. You can do just about anything you want with this interface to make it look and act almost any way you want. That is definitely a very big pro and very, very cool. Pro number 6 is it is open source. So lots of people are contributing to it. You can contribute to it. You can edit it any way you want to. There are even forks of Blender that have specific reasons for forking. Like you can make it do different things because it is open source. And it's absolutely incredible to see just the kind of things you can do with Blender just because it's open source. And that is a huge, huge pro for me. I'm also very much a proponent of open source in general, just because of open computing. And that's a whole nother subject right there. But I absolutely love that Blender is open source. And pro number 7, our final pro, it's always getting better. Like you see all this stuff right here, library of extensions, camera tracking, and video editing. All this stuff is in constant state of improvement. And my personal favorite, the full compositor. But it is in a constant state of improvement. The Blender Foundation never stops working on it. It is absolutely amazing. And through things like their open projects, if we can get this to load here. Through its open projects, they are constantly finding new things that they can improve with Blender. All starting with Elephant's Dream in 2006, coming up all the way to things like Caminendes in 2016. It is absolutely incredible to see just how much the Blender Foundation continues to work on Blender. It is incredible. I cannot state that enough. It is unreal how much they keep improving Blender year after year, release after release. But like any piece of software, there are a couple of cons. And con number 1 is it has a steep learning curve. It really does. I've interacted with many people through the YouTube channel and stuff, and a lot of them have even said that they tried Blender, but then they had to stop because of the learning curve, because it can be pretty drastic. Mostly due to con number 2, and that is tools are all over the place. You'll find tools very randomly hidden in different spots. There's no clear statement of keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. So the UI is very advanced. You can do a lot of it once you learn it. You have to learn that interface, and that's really a pretty good con for somebody who's starting out. But if you take the time to learn it, the learning curve, in my opinion, is definitely worth it. Because it's very advanced, and because it's advanced, you can do a lot with it. But both of these cons really are going to be fixed a lot in Blender 2.8. They're in 2.79 release candidate 2 right now, and after 2.79, they're coming with 2.8. And in 2.8, there is going to be a lot of improvements with user interface and even just usability in general, and a lot of other things to include real-time editing, which we'll go over a little bit maybe when we jump into Blender itself, using the new EV render engine, which has been a huge buzz lately all around the Blender community. But there is a lot of improvement coming in 2.8, which we'll probably jump into a little bit later, or really in a separate video might even be best, because there are going to be huge improvements in Blender 2.8. So that is Blender. Let's go ahead and jump on over to pick number 2, and that is Natron. Natron is very incredible. It has several pros, and then it also has a couple cons, like always. But let's jump into the pros. It has a very intuitive user interface, and you can kind of see it here, a little bit here too. They don't give, there's some as well, but the interface, just trust me, we'll get more into it in just a second. It's very intuitive, pretty straightforward. You can find the tools really easily, and it's really incredible. But pro number 2 is it's purpose-built for compositing. If you get Natron for compositing, you know that what you're getting is a compositor. It's super cool, and I love to see that about Natron. It's really, really cool. Another big boost, big pro, I should say, for Natron is its open effects support. This is really, really cool to me and can be a very big plus for just about anybody. And so you can get things like Keylight by the Foundry, which is a very popular green screening tool, like often found in After Effects, and Revision Effects products, even Ignite from HitFilm, Red Giant software. Now, I cannot guarantee that all of these will work within Natron on Linux, but like for instance, all these ones here almost should definitely work, and many of these will as well, because I don't believe these are always going to be OS dependent, although some of them can be. But it has just unreal support for OpenFX, and I absolutely love that. But it also has wide format support, which is pro number 4, as you can see here. And basically, like Blender and Lightworks and Kdenlive, which we went over last episode, it has wide format support because of FFmpeg. I love FFmpeg. Can't get over that enough. Its wide format support is incredible. If you have a video file or a just about any media file, you'll be able to use it because of FFmpeg, and it's absolutely incredible. I can't go over it enough. I know I'm a broken record on that, but I love FFmpeg. Anyway, pro number 5, it is growing fast. It was actually first released in October 22nd of 2014. That was not that long ago, only 3 years, whereas Blender has been around since the 90s. And within that 3 years, it has grown huge. And I believe a lot of it is due to that OpenFX support, considering the fact that a lot of these nodes are things like Tuttle OFX and things like that. It is incredible to see just all the tools that are in here within only 3 years. And a lot of it really is because they created an interface, they created a complete software package, but then a lot of the tools come from pre-built things that have been around even longer than Natron itself. And a lot of that comes through the OFX support. But we'll get more into that when we jump into Natron itself. And pro number 6, it is open source. That is huge to me. I absolutely love open source. We'll go more into that in a little bit. But that is definitely a big pro about Natron, is just the fact that it's open source. Anybody can contribute to it. Anybody can alter it. They can always send upstream and contribute whenever they want to. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get put into the main Natron release, but you can even create your own fork if Natron doesn't do something you want it to. And if you're a coder, you code in Python and things like that, you can definitely, or C++, you can definitely use Natron and change it to be whatever you want it to be. And for me, that is huge. Just even the fact of open computing again. But like any software, as I've already mentioned, it does have a couple of cons. And con number 1 is it's only compositing, which is a pro in and of itself, but it's also a con. As I mentioned, I love the fact that you jump into Natron and you know that what you're getting is a compositor. That's very, very nice. But like Blender can take any 3D model, you can render anything within there, and that's very, very nice. That's one of the reasons why I use Blender, is basically if I know that I need to do something, I can basically do it right there inside of Blender, and that's pretty big for me. But Natron goes into con number 2, is it doesn't even have 3D workspace. Now, this is coming in a future version, be known, but they've had this up for a while. In fact, I think I've seen this as a future release for probably, I don't know, 2 years now. I think it's been about 2 years that I've seen them saying that, that they want to add a 3D workspace, which is amazing. It is amazing, and I do think that they will get to it. But currently, it does not have a 3D workspace, and it doesn't look like it's going to be coming for a little while. But once it does come with a 3D workspace, you can actually import 3D models and things like that and do it all within Natron, which is big, but it doesn't have that right now, which for me at least can be a little bit of a con, and it may be for you as well. But it definitely doesn't stop me from wanting to use Natron. Natron is absolutely incredible. But let's jump over into our third and final choice, and that is DaVinci. Sorry, not DaVinci Resolve. It is Fusion. Should have come back here to the top. But anyway, Fusion with the new VR capabilities. The world's most advanced visual effects and 3D VR motion graphics solution. Is it actually that? Probably not, because it has its pros and it has its cons as always. Fusion is incredible. And let's go into our first pro, which is its number one. It is an industry standard. Lots of people use this. It's been used on many, many movies, as you can see here. The Martian, loved that film. It's used in Gravity and many Avengers Age of Ultron. So many movies that are known for having incredible visual effects. And a lot of that was done right inside Fusion. Super cool, super amazing, but we'll get more into that in just a second. It also has lots of tools for 3D projects. Let me see here if I can find that. But here we go, stereoscopic 3D tools in Fusion Studio. So it's not in the free version, which we'll get into in a little bit. But it does have that capability if you need to work within 3D, and it's definitely there as support on Linux. Another big pro to me is the fact that it can import and render 3D models. So yes, it can import things from Maya, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, and considering the fact that Blender can export in those formats means that it can take Blender models. So you can definitely work with 3D models inside Fusion, which is huge. So while it can't necessarily do actual 3D modeling and stuff like that inside of Fusion itself, it does take the ability to import and render 3D models. So that gap is bridged a little bit, which is very nice. That's definitely a good pro for Fusion. And it also has Fusion Connect, if we can find it here. So you can link things in between Fusion and DaVinci Resolve. So you can take a clip that's in DaVinci Resolve and work with it right inside of Fusion and have it automatically import right inside of Resolve again, which is very, very cool if you are using DaVinci Resolve. But if you watched last episode, you might not be using it just because of its lack of format support, which I do believe there are some workarounds to get FFmpeg working within Resolve, but I personally have not found a way. That would be something you might need to talk to somebody else about. But that is definitely a cool pro, and if you can get that up and running, that is definitely a cool pro. And then it has tons of built-in effects. We'll go over more of this in just a second, but if you can see right here, it just has tons built right in, and a lot of them are almost like presets. I mean, they're not quite presets, but they really can do things like that, such as film grain built right in, rays and glow and hot spots and highlights and color correction. And just look at all this right here. It has tons of them. We'll go over more of that when we jump into the software itself. All right, now, it actually has 3 cons. The last couple had only 2, but this one does have 3. Con number 1, and this one's kind of important to me. It's not a deal breaker, but it's kind of important to me, is it is closed source. I love open source, but I do work with like Lightworks, which is also closed source, but it actually has format support. But so it's not a deal breaker to me. It's just not open computing, which I love open computing. Anybody can contribute to open computing and stuff like that, open source software. But, sorry, not DaVinci Resolve, Fusion cannot do that. So if you want to write software for this, you can write plugins and stuff, but the software itself, you cannot contribute upstream. You can give support and feedback, you know, because like any company, they'll try to listen to their customers, but you personally cannot just edit and change anything about the software because it is closed source. Kind of a con to me, but it's not an absolute deal breaker because first and foremost, I am a filmmaker and I need the tools that'll help me get the job done the best. Con number 2, the free version has actually quite a few limits, okay? So if we come here and compare the 2 versions, which DaVinci Resolve does not have this page. I wish that they did for DaVinci Resolve. It'd be really nice if I could see the difference between the Lite and the Pro version of DaVinci Resolve on a nice page like this, but that's a different story. Anyway, Avid Connect plugin, the free version does not have. Not a deal breaker, because I don't think Avid is even on Linux, but anyway, Stereo VR. Okay, so this is something big. You'll see all the 3D support, which we mentioned as a Pro, it actually is not in the free version. So if you want to pay $299, you can get all that support, which is definitely not a real deal breaker for me. If it's something I would see myself needing, I would pay for it. Some of the things such as render, interactive performance for scalable remote nodes does not have. Some of these are things that you might not need to worry about if you're a one-man band and stuff like that. It's like network rendering. It doesn't have like any support for. Again, if you're a one-man band, you probably don't need to worry about that too much. Planar tracking. That is something I loved to see as a feature in Fusion, but the free version does not have it. Be known. You see planar tracking, seems amazing. To include planar roto, I mean, give me a break. The 3D camera tracker, so many cool things right there that are not available in the free version. But again, you can get the Pro version, which works in Linux, and you can definitely use that. Again, it's not a deal breaker for me. It's just it's not in the free version, so be known. But this one is something that has to relate with the free version and the paid version, which is a con number 3, and that is FFmpeg has to be done by you manually. It's not directly supported within Fusion. So if you want to work with MP4s, MOVs, anything like that, just like Resolve, you're going to have to find a way to get it to work yourself, to be like FFmpeg Bridge. And I did some looking up on this. I couldn't find a quick, easy way to do this, but just so you know, there is actually a way to get FFmpeg to work within DaVinci Resolve, which is nice that you can get it to work, but it's not right there directly built in to Fusion. Kind of sucks. And I don't know if you can actually use this for DaVinci Resolve. So if you can do this within DaVinci Resolve, well, there you go. You've actually got format support. But it's like, come on, Blackmagic Design. You do so much. You got so much money behind you. Why can't you just build in the open source free standard of FFmpeg? Give me a break. Build it in, Blackmagic Design. A little bit of a rant for you there. It's like, really? Really? You cannot give your software FFmpeg support? Whereas these free open source solutions do accept it? Come on, Blackmagic Design. I know, that's a little bit of a rant right there. I am sorry, but it is ridiculous that they won't do it for Fusion or DaVinci Resolve. And it's free, and it's open source. They can do it. Come on! Maybe Fusion 10? Maybe DaVinci Resolve 15? Hey! And I did hear something about Fusion 14 having better codec support, but again, that's a different story. But so yeah, that's a pretty big con right there. I know I go on to rants, but when software doesn't have a wide range of format support and it's being done by a big company and FFmpeg is a free and open standard that they can use, that's when I start going on to a rampage. Give me a break. Just give us some format support with FFmpeg, please. Anyway, so that's a pretty big con if you couldn't tell. So that does it for looking at the software within the web browser on their websites. So all three of these options sure seem to boast a lot, and each one has their pros and their cons. But how do they work practically? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. So here we are in Blender, and this is a example project I have for you up here. This is from a short film I did a while back, and it's just kind of to show you exactly what it can do. And as we go down, we can kind of see, because all of these are node-based, so you need to be familiar with node-based compositing. And if you do not know about node-based compositing, make sure to watch this episode here to get kind of a brief overview of how to get started. But so we have our first layer, which is just simply, you know, the actress on the ground. And then I created a matte painting inside of GIMP, which is a future episode in this series. So, and then also I have a render layer here. And this is something that is so amazing about Blender. For instance here, as you can see, I have done CG fire. Okay, and then we've got here, and then I just very simply rendered it. And we've got our render layer. We've got, oh, sorry, I did not mean to do that. But anyway, and then it got all added back on top of our matte painting and our original footage. And it's very simple. It's very straightforward. Something cool too, you can go over here and you've got all of your nodes available. This is kind of nice that they added this feature in to have these super cool tabs right here. But also you can hit Shift A and get a full menu right here. And then of course you could, you know, size this back down, but you can Shift A and come down here to say distort, add a transform node, come here, we'll transform it this way. So super cool. Now, one thing that's would be very nice is controls right here on the canvas. For instance, if I add a transform node and I select it, or I selected, say, let me see, say I selected this transform node, or this one here, it'd be nice to have those tools right on the canvas so that I don't have to sit here and play with a bunch of numbers. As you can see here, you have to input numbers to move it across somewhere. But it'd be nice to be able to have the tool right here on the canvas so that I can then just easily move the layer around, or the actual object around right there on the canvas. That would be so nice, and I would love to be able to do that. But I mean, you can't, and it's not a big loss, but it would be kind of a nice thing to have. So like Control X is what I did to delete that object. But so here, if I, let me see. So here we have hue saturation value. And I just added a little bit of extra saturation because I felt it wasn't quite saturated enough. But we remove that. Whoop. If we, sorry, come here, remove that. There it is right there. And then we can add that again. So you can see we added it there. We can change some of the colors here. Of course, we don't really need to do too much here. Increase some of that, take it down. Ooh, wow. Ugh. But so you get the point. It's a node-based compositor. It does very well, and we have our masks here, which is all done inside of Blender. As we can come here, go to the UV image editor, change it to masks. As you can see, I have my mask right there, and we have our different mask layers. And then we come back over to the node compositor, and we've got it all right here. Super straightforward, super nice. Got the complete 3D workspace, so I can 3D model, I can create fire, I can do whatever I want within a 3D workspace, and have it right here within the compositor. I just love it. Blender is, without a doubt, my favorite compositing system. But so that's kind of a basic walkthrough. Cons-wise, again, it's a little bit more of an advanced interface. If you want to get to know Blender, you really have to spend, you know, I would say a good couple weeks just playing, watching tutorials, right here on Film World, of course, and just getting to know Blender's interface and how it works. But once you learn how it works, it's a very great payoff. And nodes-wise, there's a good amount. There's not exactly a whole lot of presets, but there's so many different nodes that do their job and do their job well that you can come up with different presets. And if we come up here to File and User Preferences and go to the Add-ons page, you can see, let me see, it should be under here, I believe. We got a couple of different add-ons. We can do Freestyle SVG importer and things like that. It's super cool. But you know, it's import, export. There's a lot of different add-ons that will, again, come back to compositing. But that's one thing here is I wish that there was just simply a compositing tab. That would be very nice to have, just so you know that, oh, I add this and it'll add it right to the compositing importer, or the compositing interface. but it just does its job, and it does its job well. I absolutely love Blender's compositor, and I think you will as well. But again, it might not be exactly your cup of tea. So that's pretty much Blender. I mean, there's not much else to say. It does a good job. And of course, you can watch many tutorials right here on the Film World YouTube channel. We have lots of them because a lot of people love Blender, and it's definitely a great thing to learn. And so I have actually linked in the description below several tutorials so that you can get started, or even just follow along with a couple of different effects to do yourself within Blender. A lot of fun ones such as the Superman takeoff effect and the annoying orange effect, which goes over a lot of the Blender compositor, which again, I just love. So now let's jump into our second choice, and that is Natron. Now I'm just using some PNGs here and doing a very basic composite here just as an example, and I try to use the same scene, and I did a little bit different with it. Now, something I mentioned that would be very nice to have in Blender, which Natron does have, is these tooltips right here on the canvas. So I can move the mask around. So as you can see, it's adding things to and taking away because it's the mask, and it's right there on our canvas, and it's so cool to be able to add that or have that right there. And like for instance, I can rotate this layer. I mean, give me a break. And then of course it can snap back to original, and then I can move this layer around. I love that right there on the canvas, and I don't have to play around with a bunch of numbers over here and stuff. I just love having these tools right here on the canvas. And of course we can toggle hide those so that we can do a little bit of changing. Now, Natron is a little bit different. As you can see, it's a little bit more of a nuke-like interface, but it's a little bit different in Blender in the fact that basically if you work within any tool, it doesn't have any of the tool options right here in the compositor. They're all over here. So it's a little bit of a bridge between, say, Blender and After Effects. So you basically work a lot with this, almost like layers. You work, or just After Effects use of layers, you work with all of your tools right here. So for instance, I have the color grade. As you can see, it selects it right here, and I can see exactly where it is. So we can change some of the black, as you can see on the fire right there. See, I'm changing the blacks down, changing them up. We can change it to about right there. And then some of the whites, we'll increase those, decrease those. And so it does a pretty good job. There's a lot of tools within Natron. There are a lot of tools. So it's really cool because it uses Tuttle OFX and other OFX things such as that. And then also some built-in ones that are directly within Natron. You get a lot of choices. Glow, God Rays, InPaint. I mean, just so many cool ones right here within Natron, and a couple of keyers so you can do some green screening and stuff like that. It's absolutely amazing, and of course it's got the basics such as merge and transform, things like that, which we got transform here. We got a mask right here, so if we go ahead and just add that to the viewer, you can see the mask right there. Again, it can be changed using all these different options. Let's go ahead and just remove that. There we go. So it's super cool to have all this right here with the Natron, and it is a dedicated compositor. As you can see, it's got all the different tooltips as well. I started to point there at the screen, but see down here when I move my cursor, you know, you've got all the different red, blue, green values and things like that. The coordinates on the actual image. It's super incredible, and I mean, something else too is like Natron can work with 4K just fine, just like Blender, and actually Fusion as well. So they all can do things like 4K, so you don't have to worry about that there. But it's super cool to be able to do it, and you've got your information such as 1920 by 1080 right here and stuff like that. So I mean, it's really a more straightforward interface than Blender. I would say it's a lot easier to use just right off the bat. So if you just want to jump in and do some quick compositing, I would say that Natron is probably a little bit easier to use. You have your timeline right here, so you can go to like frame 120. Of course, you can play it out, and you can stop it. And, some of the playback can be a little bit laggy, or I mean, it just depends, of course, on the workload. But it's super cool to have just such a straightforward, dedicated compositor with Natron. It's super, I absolutely love it, and I want to start using it more and more. I just never really found a whole lot of use for Natron because I know and use Blender so much, but I definitely want to start using Natron more, especially lately. And you'll be seeing some more tutorials and stuff like that on Natron in the future, because it's absolutely incredible. It really is very, very cool. And if you learn Natron, more than likely you'll be able to jump over to Nuke, which is also an industry standard and also available on Linux, by the way. And you'll be able to do some more things within Nuke. And you can basically put on your resume, I know Nuke. Of course, I wouldn't recommend you say, I know Nuke on your resume if you haven't used it. But, I mean, it very much is a Nuke-esque interface. And it's super cool. It just does a good job. Everything seems high quality. Again, FFmpeg is right there and stuff like that. So it works, and it just works well. So I love Natron. Now let's jump over to our final option, and that is Fusion. Now, Fusion, I went with these PNGs simply because that's all it can seem to do. It can do, you know, it can do things like image sequences and stuff like that, and, you know, PNGs, JPEGs, it seems to do that fine, but it doesn't want to take any MP4, MOV files, MPEG files. It doesn't want to accept any video format, and it kind of sucks. And I haven't completed the composite here because, to be honest, I actually installed this like 2 days ago just for this video, because I don't have a whole lot of reason why I want to use Fusion. It's very, very cool. And as you can see here, something big I love is just all of the effects. Like, it has so many effects right here within Fusion. It is absolutely incredible. Almost presets as well, which is nice and bad and stuff, but planar tracker, I'm sorry, unavailable in Fusion because you have to have the paid upgrade, which again, I would totally do if I wanted to use Fusion. But again, and it's got the tooltips, the tools all right here on the canvas, which is nice. But like, I try to come here and preview my merge node, so flick it up into there. There's nothing there. Even though I have things plugged right in, it doesn't want to show anything from my merge nodes or my saver node and stuff like that. It's really confusing. I'd have to play with it a lot more. We have our timeline down here, but that's interesting. So they're static images, but they only appear on frame 1. So things like that, I'd really have to play with Fusion a little bit more to get more familiar with it, and I definitely might do that in future, not just because I want to know Fusion, but also it does definitely seem like a good option, and I would highly recommend that you guys try it out as well. If you're new to compositing, this would definitely be a great way to go. Just jump in, learn it. You're learning an industry standard. You're doing it right there on Linux. It is closed source. It's not an open source, and if you want some of the features such as you know, planar tracking, or you know, some of the more advanced features such as working with 3D, you'll have to pay for the for the paid upgrade. But yeah, so see there, it's got a couple of things going for it and not going for it, and a lot of it just has to do with Blackmagic sitting on their butt, not wanting to give you features, or they're taking away features. But, I mean, FFmpeg, come on, just give us FFmpeg. If I had FFmpeg within Fusion, I would definitely give it a much greater look, because it really does look incredible. I mean, it really is so cool. But the lack of support for codecs, and then also just the fact that it's closed source and stuff like that, doesn't make me want to just jump right into it. It's definitely very good, but, oh, sorry, I thought that said Blender 3D. It says Bender 3D. Okay, never mind. But I was like, oh, whoa, what's that? But so yeah, so Fusion is very, very cool and definitely a good option on Linux, and I cannot thank Blackmagic Design enough for bringing it to Linux, especially for free. And definitely jump in and play with it, guys. It really does look good. But for me personally, I've got Blender and I've got Natron, and I've used them both, and they are both incredible options. And so I don't have a whole lot of need to come over to Fusion. But if you want to just jump in and start learning a industry standard and things like that, again, Fusion is a great way to go. So that is my options, and we're just playing with these lightly within Linux, and there's definitely more things that we can talk about, more things that we can do with each of these. This is just the tip of the iceberg. To go any further into depth, we definitely would need some tutorials, which definitely will be coming in the future, especially for Natron. We've got, of course, more Blender tutorials coming. Just stay tuned to the Film World YouTube channel and make sure you subscribe and share videos to help keep Film World going. But yeah, so that pretty much wraps it up, guys. There's Blender, Natron, and Fusion. This episode of Premiere Prep is brought to you by EditShare Lightworks. Lightworks is Hollywood-proven video editing software that is available on Windows, Linux, and Mac. It's been used on movies such as Hugo, The Aviator, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Wolf of Wall Street, and The King's Speech, just to name a few. With Lightworks' wonderful new user interface, it's ready for any type of project you throw at it. It's also built on FFmpeg, which allow Lightworks to read nearly any video format. Lightworks even works with Red Footage, ProRes, and DNx HD, and has 10-bit color capabilities, multicam editing, hardware I/O support, many built-in effects, and far more as well. Go to lwks.com and use promo code FilmWorld2017 to receive a 40% discount off your Lightworks purchase. A link is in the description. And please make sure you tell them that Filmworld sent you. Also, a big thank you to the EditShare Lightworks team for 1, their amazing piece of software, and 2, for sponsoring this episode of Premiere Prep. So that is visual effects software on Linux, and those are just my top 3 favorites. There are other options as well. And like any piece of software on any operating system, each one comes with its own set of pros and cons, and it's up to you to decide exactly which one or ones you want to use. Hopefully this shows you that Linux is not just doable with visual effects, it's actually a great option to go with. And that concludes part 2. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you stay tuned next Friday for part 3, where I'll be going over audio tools. I cannot wait to get that episode to you next Friday. And this Tuesday, as always, we have Film World Community. So make sure you get your questions in for that in the comments below, or tweet me at FilmWorldYT. That really does it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm your host, Micah Pendleton. Remember to live your life one frame at a time, and I will catch you next time.